Hello, my name is Barbara. I'm a teacher as well as a tutor, and I primarily teach English and history. I also am the owner of First Rate Tutors, which is basically a collective of tutors, and we offer lots of different last-minute revision tips and videos on our YouTube channel, essentially relating to English, maths, history, politics, lots of different topics, and we cover primary school as well as GCSE and A Levels. So lots of our revision videos just really focus on making revision much easier, accessible, and especially when you have lots of last-minute revision videos to watch. So we try and make it as easy as possible to check out. So make sure you check out our website, but also check out our YouTube channel to find out more in terms of the stuff that we offer you as students. Now, I'm really excited to be collaborating with Hawthorne Arts, who sent me a few questions to answer from a teacher's perspective. So I'm going to get started. Now, the first question is, what's your best piece of advice for GCSE and A-level students at this time? Now, speaking from a teacher's perspective in terms of what's going on, quarantine, of course, this disease has completely transformed lots of different things. As you probably know, the GCSE and A levels for 2020 were cancelled. So lots of different things have happened, and this time is a very strange time for everybody. So from a student's perspective, you're probably feeling quite anxious, but don't think you're alone. Don't think that there are not other students who aren't just as anxious about the future as you are, but also, believe it or not, lots of teachers like me are feeling really anxious. Lots of adults who you might think have it figured out are also really unsure about what's happening. They're unsure about the future. So firstly, if you feel really anxious at the moment, you are maybe feeling a little bit alone, you're not seeing your friends as often as you'd like to, you're not even sure about the future, don't worry. This sense of anxiety is really normal, and lots of other people across the country are feeling it. However, my other piece of advice in terms of during this time, if you are, for example, a year 10 student moving on to year 11, but also if you're a year 11 student and you want to go into further education, so you want to get an A level or you want to even go on to university, try your best to keep your mind active. So it might feel like, you know, your days, there's nothing, you're just basically waiting for September to start. Don't do that. If you want to, of course, go into further education, try and keep your mind active. Try and read at least a book. Try and, for example, if you're moving into GCSEs, try and ask your teachers, you know, email them and ask them, you know, what suggestions they'd give in terms of a reading list. Maybe you already have your reading list. Maybe you've already started. Try and read in advance. Same thing goes for A levels. You know, try to keep your mind active so that it doesn't feel very alien to you, because at the moment it seems like schools are going to be resuming properly in September. Don't wait until September to get started when everything is happening all at once, and try to keep your mind active, but also that will take your mind off maybe some of the anxiety that you might be feeling. Now, the second question is, what's your piece of advice for teachers during this time? Now, as a teacher myself, and I'm still currently teaching, but also tutoring lots of students, I'm finding that perhaps it can be very challenging for them to stay motivated. Perhaps there's not necessarily a target that they're working towards. That's sometimes the hardest thing to motivate yourself for. So my advice for teachers is, if you're finding that perhaps your students are not as motivated, just try your best to be understanding. This is a really difficult time for them. It's sometimes really hard to be motivated if you're at home all day. You're not necessarily working towards a real schedule. So just try as a teacher to be just a little bit understanding and try and put yourself in your students' shoes. Now, the third question is, what made you start your YouTube channel? So as I mentioned, I'm also the founder of First Rate Tutors. That's the YouTube channel as well. Now, the primary reason why I actually started this channel is because as a teacher of both English and history, sometimes when we're teaching certain texts, we have to do some reading in advance. Sometimes it can be quite challenging to find this material. I'm quite busy, especially during my work days, and sometimes I used to find that getting a summary video of something is much more easier to understand when I'm teaching a particular topic. But what I found when I was looking for some of these topics, say for instance, a really specific piece of information related to the Cold War for history, or a specific text such as Antony and Cleopatra by William Shakespeare. There just simply wasn't that much information that was digestible out there, especially on YouTube. So really the primary reason why I started First Rate Tutors is just to have information out there in a really bite-sized chunk for different students, but also different teachers who need this information. Believe it or not, when you as a student are watching some of these revision videos, your teachers are also watching this. They're getting information from it. And as I mentioned, there's lots of other tutors such as maths tutors and science tutors that also have contributed to our channel, and they offer this information too. So really that's the main reason. But also the other reason is this is kind of a hobby for me. I like teaching. I like just offering information. So this YouTube channel is also a little bit of a hobby for me. Now, the fourth question is, do you think there should be changes to the curriculum, especially when it comes to history and English as we're taught in school? My answer is yes, I do think so. I think the curriculum as it is quite good, especially the English and history curriculum, which I'm most familiar with as an English and history teacher. But I do feel like a lot of the text that we read in English, but also a lot of the history that we look at in history can be very European focused. And of course, this is really important. We live in the UK, we need to know UK history, and that's important. However, it would also be good if the curriculum could reflect other types of history, which is just also as important. African history, Caribbean history, Latin American history, even Asian history. Now, this is taught when you go a little bit into more advanced academia or academics. So for example, if you go to university and you especially study some humanities topics with like a global focus, that's when you start learning more about Latin American politics or history or literature, and of course, you know, African, Caribbean and so on. But it would be really good if some of this information was also incorporated at a slightly earlier stage in our learning, because not everybody goes on to university to study humanities, and it would be good to have an idea of other types of literature by African authors, by Caribbean authors, Latin American authors, but of course also their histories. So I do think, you know, it would be great if the curriculum can be expanded just a little bit more, so we can have European history, even American history, but also histories of other cultures and also their writing reflected in the literature in English. Now, the fifth and final question is, do you have an optimistic, cautious or pessimistic view of the future of education in the UK? Now, if I'm being really honest, I have a very optimistic view when it comes to the future of education in the UK. Now, of course, with everything that's going on, it can be really easy to feel pessimistic. Even as a teacher, it can be quite easy to feel pessimistic. But I think when we look at just the broader trends, for example, what's happening has caused us to shift way more quickly into digital education. We've now probably signed up for more online courses. I myself as a teacher have released lots of online courses, including an English GCSE course, lots of history courses for both GCSE and A Level. So firstly, I think the way the trends in education are going towards being far more digital, this is actually quite a good trend, and it's a really optimistic trend, because what this means is we can, alongside of physical lessons, because physical kind of lessons, seeing people in person, this is still quite important. However, alongside that, we can supplement our education in a far cheaper way by having more online courses and more digital learning. Now, one thing I found, for example, with some of my courses, I have people in places like Botswana, Israel, who have signed up to a GCSE English course. That therefore means, from what I can see, there are a lot of people maybe outside of the country, outside of the UK, and even outside of London, who are benefiting a lot from this online learning. And so I think this means that education is becoming way more inclusive for us all, but also way more accessible. Also, even at the normal level, a lot of people, when they kind of fall behind in learning, sometimes tutoring is an option, but it can be quite an expensive option. So online lessons as well offer a far cheaper way to kind of improve. So I feel really optimistic about the future of education, and I think we're going in the right direction. So I want to say thank you so much to Hawthorne Arts for sending me these questions. I loved having this collab. And if you want any more information, or if you're curious to know a little bit more about First Rate Tutors, please do check us out on YouTube. Just type in First, as in First, F-I-R-S-T, Rate, which is R-A-T-E, Tutors, T-U-T-O-R-S. And as I mentioned, you're going to find lots of last-minute revision materials, lots of information that can help you, especially if you're a student on your academic journey, but also if you're a teacher and you happen to come across this video. Thank you so much for listening.